outstanding achievement in the field of child psychology. I believe what they wrote is...
You don't know so many things. I do.
What do you want? Oh my God.
I was afraid. I don't want to be afraid no more. Just give me a minute. Ben Friedkin. Ronald Sumner. Vincent. Quiet. Very smart.
There's a warmth to the very first minutes of The Sixth Sense that the movie earns on purpose. It's not accidental. M. Night Shyamalan wants you comfortable. He wants you inside the life of Dr. Malcolm Crowe before he starts dismantling it, piece by piece, in ways you won't fully understand until the last 5 minutes of the film. Though we open here, a Philadelphia townhouse, night, the kind of warm amber light that feels like it belongs to a home with history. Malcolm Crowe and his wife Anna have just come back from a formal city ceremony where Malcolm was awarded a municipal commendation, an honor from the mayor of Philadelphia recognizing his work as a child psychologist. They're slightly wine-drunk and happy about it. Anna leads him downstairs to the wine cellar, holding a flashlight, already laughing at something. She reads aloud from a newspaper article about the award. She teases him a little. He calls her the best part of his day. It's the kind of scene you almost want to skip past on a rewatch, because you already know what's coming, and watching two people be this happy when you know what's about to happen is almost painful. But don't skip it. Everything in this sequence matters. Bruce Willis plays Malcolm as a man fully at ease in his own skin. Not arrogant, that's not quite it. More like someone who has built something he's genuinely proud of and can afford to be relaxed about it now. He moves through his home with quiet confidence. You get the sense that he and Anna have been together long enough to have their own shorthand, their own rhythms. The teasing is warm. The eye contact is real. When he holds her in that basement, illuminated by a flashlight and a little too much wine, you believe these two people. Olivia Williams as Anna gives you just enough in this scene to make the rest of the film hurt. She's bright, grounded, a little dry. She holds the newspaper article up like a trophy and acts mock impressed. It's the kind of marital playfulness that only exists between people who genuinely like each other, not just love each other, and that distinction matters more than it seems like it does right now. Then something moves upstairs, a small sound, the kind that makes you stop mid-sentence and tilt your head, a window somewhere, a soft crack of glass. Malcolm says he'll go check. He goes upstairs. Anna stays by the wine. What he finds in the bedroom stops him in the doorway. A man stands across the room in the dark, barefoot, thin, wearing nothing but underwear, shivering slightly despite the warmth of the house. His name is Vincent Gray. This is only confirmed by what follows, not by any introduction. And Donnie Wahlberg, who plays him, does something remarkable in this scene by doing almost nothing at all. Vincent doesn't lunge forward, he doesn't scream, he just stands there, and the wrongness of him radiates across the room like a drop in temperature. His eyes are the problem. They're dry in the way eyes get when a person has passed through grief into something that no longer feels like anything. Whatever Vincent Gray came here to do, he's been planning it long enough that the emotion around it has gone cold. Malcolm tries to slow him down. You can see the professional instincts kick in. Soft voice, open posture, the deliberate calm of someone trained to talk distressed people down from ledges. He asks Vincent's name. He tries to make contact. He keeps his distance but keeps talking, because that's what he knows how to do. He's good at this. He does this for a living. Vincent isn't interested in being calmed down. He tells Malcolm he failed him. That when Vincent was a child, Malcolm wrote him off, classified his experience as paranoid schizophrenia, slapped a label on him, sent him back out into the world with a diagnosis that told him he was crazy. And Vincent spent every year after that carrying that verdict, living inside it, building a life around the understanding that what he saw, what he experienced, what terrified him in the dark, all of it was just malfunction, just a broken mind making things up. He wasn't making things up. That's the charge, and it lands. You can see it land on Malcolm's face, not just fear of the situation, but the specific horror of a professional man being told that his careful, well-intentioned work destroyed someone. There's no defense against that. There's nothing to say. Donnie Wahlberg has maybe 4 minutes of screen time in this entire film, and he makes Vincent Gray feel enormous. The performance is controlled in a way that's genuinely unsettling. This is a man who has rehearsed this moment, maybe thousands of times, who arrived here with a decision already made. The gun that appears in his hand doesn't come out with any drama. He doesn't wave it around. He holds it the way you hold something you've long since made peace with using. He fires once. Malcolm goes down, hard. The sound is sharp and wrong. Anna screams somewhere behind you in the house, or maybe in your memory. The film cuts before you hear her reach the room. Malcolm is on the floor, and then the gun turns, and then Vincent makes his own decision. Black screen. The next fall. That cut is doing so much work it almost buckles under the weight of it. We don't get a hospital scene, no recovery. No press coverage of a city psychologist shot by a disturbed former patient. No glimpse of Malcolm healing or grieving or rebuilding. Shyamalan gives us a year-shaped gap and trusts us to fill it with our assumptions, with the natural, reasonable human assumption that Malcolm Crowe survived, recovered, and is now returning to work. Those assumptions are the entire foundation of everything that follows. The next fall, a new case file sits on a desk. The name on it, Cole Sear, 9 years old. Referred for behavioral concerns, social withdrawal, possible anxiety disorder. The notes Malcolm reviews describe a boy who has been written off by schools and counselors and well-meaning adults as troubled, a word that tends to function as the end of a conversation rather than the beginning of one. Malcolm reads the file like someone looking for a reflection. The similarities to Vincent's case jump off the page at him. Same age, same symptom cluster, same walls up against every adult who's tried to reach him. He takes the case. When they meet for the first time, Cole Sear is sitting alone in the back of a church. Not praying, just sitting, surrounded by tiny figurines of saints arranged carefully on the pew beside him, a private ritual that he doesn't bother to explain or defend. He watches Malcolm approach the way a cat watches an unfamiliar person enter a room, not aggressive, not fleeing, just measuring, calculating how much trust to extend, which is none at first. Haley Joel Osment was 11 years old when this film was shot. Think about that. What he does in this role, the precise calibration of fear and guardedness and buried intelligence held perfectly still across 2 hours of film, would be remarkable from an actor 3 times his age. There's a moment in this first meeting where Cole looks at Malcolm and says something sharp, something that cuts through the small talk, and you suddenly see the acuity behind the frightened exterior. This is not a dim child. This is a bright child who has learned that being bright hasn't helped him. Malcolm sits down beside him anyway. He doesn't push. He doesn't run through intake questions or pull out a clipboard. He just stays. Because something in Cole Sear, the dark circles, the careful stillness, the controlled distance, reminds him of a young man who stood shaking in his bedroom 1 year ago. He's not going to fail this one. Cole's home life, as we begin to understand it, runs on Lynn Sear's shoulders alone. Toni Collette plays Lynn as a woman running at full capacity, working long shifts, managing the household, showing up for her son with everything she has while something she can't see or name is slowly eating him. She's not negligent. She's not absent. She watches Cole with the intensity of a parent who knows something is wrong and cannot figure out what. She notices the scratches that appear on Cole's arms without explanation. She notices the way he checks locks, rechecks them, builds a tent of saint figurines around his bed at night like a ring of protection. She notices the way a room sometimes goes cold around her son, a detail she files somewhere in the back of her mind because the alternative explanation is one she isn't ready for. What she sees in Cole's eyes is fear. Constant, bone-deep, completely private fear. At school, Cole is the kid that other kids give a wide berth to without quite being able to say why. A boy named Tommy Tommissimo makes sport of him in the way that children sometimes zero in on whoever is most visibly vulnerable. Not out of cruelty exactly, but out of that tribal instinct that treats difference as a threat. Cole doesn't fight back, he absorbs it. He's got bigger things to deal with. He carries something. That's the only way to describe it. From the very first shot of Haley Joel Osment's face, those enormous, exhausted eyes, that carefully composed expression of a child managing something enormous, you know Cole Sear is carrying something that he has carried alone for a very long time. And somewhere in this city, in a church pew, in a school hallway, in the backseat of his mother's car, that something is still with him, still walking beside him, still waiting to be heard. Carries something, bone deep, year-shaped gap, the wrongness of him, full capacity, heavy use of he and she, sentence openers, what he does, finds, sees, constructions. Fresh sentence starters queued, time jumps, 3 sessions in, sound sensory openers, contradiction openers, the strange thing about watch, direct verb, launches, watch how, rhetorical setup lines, location anchors. AI language blacklisted for this part. The film effectively, one could argue, it is worth noting, serves to illustrate remarkable performance. 3 sessions in, Malcolm still doesn't have much. Not because Cole is hostile, he isn't exactly. It's more like the kid has learned to be polite in a way that doesn't cost him anything. He answers questions. He shows up on time. He sits in the chair across from Malcolm with his hands folded in his lap, gives short answers, and watches everything. Cole Sear watches adults the way someone watches a road after a bad accident on it, with knowledge. With a specific kind of caution that only comes from experience, Malcolm keeps showing up anyway. The therapy room they use is simple: chairs, a small table, natural light from a window that faces a quiet street. Malcolm doesn't use a desk between them. Deliberate choice. No clipboard, no notepad propped up like a barrier. He wants proximity, or at least the possibility of it, and he's patient enough to let Cole set the pace. What he's noticed, between session 1 and session 3, is that Cole's eyes do something specific when a question gets too close to whatever he's actually thinking about. They go flat. Not scared, not defensive, just blank, like a shop that pulled its shutters down so fast you almost missed it happening. That shuddering reflex tells Malcolm something. It tells him Cole has had to protect himself a lot, and protecting yourself that fluently at 9 years old means you've had plenty of practice. Lynn Sear drove Cole here for the first session with her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, not from stress about traffic. She'd sat outside the building for a few minutes before coming in, Cole told Malcolm in an offhand way that probably wasn't meant to be revealing but was. He said it casually, the way kids sometimes volunteer information they've been turning over quietly, like they've been holding it at arm's length and finally just set it down. She cried a little in the car. She thought I couldn't see, but I could. He didn't say it to make anyone feel sorry for him. He said it as a fact. Malcolm wrote almost nothing in the file after that session. He didn't need to. The image of Lynn Sear crying in a parking lot because she doesn't know how to help her own son, that's the kind of thing that stays with you whether you write it down or not. At home, Cole has a ritual. Every night before bed, he arranges his saints. These aren't toys in any conventional sense. They're small figurines, religious icons, the kind of thing you'd find in a Catholic gift shop or an old grandmother's windowsill. Cole has dozens of them, and he places them with specific deliberateness at the edges of his bed in a loose perimeter. A ring. It's not random. He's thought about the spacing. He's tested it. Lynn knows about the saints. She doesn't remove them. She doesn't ask about them anymore either, because the one time she did, Cole went somewhere behind his eyes that took him most of a day to come back from. There's also a locked cabinet in Cole's room, not locked by Lynn, by Cole. He keeps the key on a cord around his neck, even at school, even in the bath. What's inside it is his business, and the fact that a 9-year-old has made himself a locked room inside his own locked room is either heartbreaking or alarming, depending on how you choose to look at it. Lynn chose heartbreaking. Malcolm, reading the notes she'd handed over before the first session, chose both. Cole exists in a particular social geometry that kids develop instinctively around the one person in class nobody can quite explain. He isn't the target of relentless coordinated cruelty. Tommy, Tammy, Simo, and his friends are opportunistic more than dedicated. They do what they do when the moment presents itself and the adults aren't watching, the usual low-grade harassment of slightly different kids that schools everywhere have failed to stop since forever. What they pick on isn't anything specific about Cole. It's more that he doesn't respond right. He absorbs it too quietly. He doesn't cry, doesn't fight back, doesn't do the thing you're supposed to do when someone makes sport of you. He just waits for it to be over. That waiting quality is what puts them off most. You can't get a reaction out of Cole Sear when he's decided not to give you one, and there's something in that stillness that the Tommies of the world find slightly unnerving without understanding why. By session 4, Malcolm tries something different. Free association. Low-stakes word games that are actually diagnostic tools dressed up in casual clothes, a technique for getting underneath conscious resistance, for catching what the mind will blurt out when it's not braced for the question. He reads a word. Cole responds with the first thing that comes to him. Fast. Before the shutters can come down. School. Cole says. Alone. Home. Cole says. Careful. Outside. Cole says. They're there too. Malcolm pauses on that last one. He keeps his voice even because any shift in register right now will close Cole down completely. He rephrases, gently, who's outside, Cole? And the shutters close. Not rudely, Cole doesn't storm off or go silent in the hostile way. He just redirects, smoothly, to something safer. He mentions a video game. He asks about Malcolm's day. He deploys the social camouflage of a kid who has gotten very, very good at changing the subject. Malcolm lets it go, for now. But he sits with, they're there too, for the rest of the day. Here's the thing about working with children who've experienced trauma or abnormal fear responses. The textbook tells you to look for the narrative. The consistent story a kid tells themselves about what's wrong, because that story, however distorted, however defended, is the map. Follow it carefully enough and you find the wound underneath. What Malcolm can't quite pin down yet is what Cole's story is. With Vincent Gray, it was clear in retrospect. Vincent believed he was seeing things, real, present, impossible things, and the adults in his life, including Malcolm, handed him a label that said, your perception is broken, and sent him back out. The story Vincent told himself, by the end, was, I am broken, and no one will fix me. That story had a tragic logic to it. Cole's story is harder to read. The fear is real. It's obvious. It's enormous. It radiates off this kid in waves. But it isn't the fear of someone who thinks they're broken. It's the fear of someone who thinks they're right about something that nobody around them can see. That's a different thing entirely. Malcolm runs home one evening and Anna is at the dinner table with her back to the door. She doesn't turn around when he comes in. She's looking at something on the table, papers maybe, or just the tabletop itself, and there's a quality to her stillness that he can't quite read. He says her name. She doesn't respond immediately. When she does turn, she seems surprised to see him, which is strange, because they live here. They've lived here together for years. He mentions the new case, Cole, and she nods in the way you nod at something you heard but didn't process. She excuses herself from the table, goes upstairs. Malcolm stands in the kitchen for a moment, alone. He tells himself she's tired, it's late. She's been working. They'll talk tomorrow. There are a lot of things in the sixth sense that you don't notice until the second watch. The dinner table scene is one of them. On first viewing, Anna just seems distracted, stressed, a little cold. The marriage feels like it hit a rough patch. Not unusual for people in demanding jobs, not alarming enough to flag. On second viewing, everything in this moment sits differently. But we'll get there. Session 5. Cole looks worse than last week. Not physically sick, just depleted, in the way that people look when they've had too little sleep for too long. Malcolm asks about the circles under his eyes. Cole shrugs, says he doesn't sleep great, as sometimes it gets cold in his room at night and he can't figure out why. How cold? Cole looks at his hands. Really cold. Malcolm watches him. Cole glances up, and for a half second, one brief, unguarded moment before the shutters engage, there's something in his eyes that isn't a kid describing trouble sleeping. It's something rawer than that. Something that looks a lot like the particular exhaustion of a person who has been afraid every single night for as long as they can remember. Malcolm closes his notebook. He's not going anywhere. He'll be back next week and the week after and however many weeks it takes. Because somewhere inside all that careful stillness, inside all those locks and saints and single-word answers, Cole Sear is trying to tell someone something. He just needs to believe, really believe, that this time somebody will listen. Carry something, shutters close, sits differently. We'll get there. He's not going anywhere. Bone deep, 3 sessions in. Low-grade harassment. Heavy, he-she, openers. The wrongness of him. Fresh starters loaded. Sensory openers. Contradiction frames for a while. Object first anchors. Time anchors. 2 weeks later. Direct address punches. Short declarative blasts. Something is scratching Cole Sear in the night. Lynn found the first marks on a Tuesday, 3 thin lines across his left forearm, raised and red, the kind of scratch you'd expect from catching a branch or a fence edge. She asked him about it. Cole said he didn't know how it got there. She filed it under rough play, check again tomorrow. Tomorrow there were more, not in the same spot. On his shoulder blade this time, and once, the one that made her sit down on the bathroom floor and just breathe for a minute, across his collarbone in a pattern that didn't look random. She's a mother. She knows what a random scratch from normal childhood looks like. This wasn't it. The pediatrician found no medical explanation, no skin condition, no signs of self-harm in the clinical sense. The doctor used the word idiopathic, meaning, in plain language, we don't know why this is happening, and recommended continuing the therapy with Dr. Crow. Lynn drove home gripping the steering wheel again. At night, Cole builds his tent. He's done this for a while now, but the construction has gotten more elaborate. The figurines are the outer ring, saints and angels arranged at precise intervals along the bed frame and the floor on 3 sides. Inside that, a blanket fort, pulled tight. Cole sleeps in there with a flashlight he keeps on all night, the beam pointed at the ceiling of the tent so the whole small space glows faintly orange. He told Malcolm about the tent in passing, not as a complaint or a confession, just as a fact of his nightly routine. Malcolm asked why the flashlight. Cole said the dark makes it worse. Makes what worse? That careful pause, that specific hesitation where you can almost see Cole measuring the distance between what he knows and what he can say out loud. The cold, he finally said. When it gets cold, I can't tell where they are. Malcolm underlined the word they in his notes and didn't ask the follow-up question. Not yet. Cole had opened a door 1/2 inch. Forcing it wider would slam it shut entirely. The locked cabinet became an issue at school before it became one at home. Cole wears the key on a cord around his neck. This is the detail that a substitute teacher noticed during gym class and flagged to the school counselor. A 9-year-old with a key worn like a talisman, unwilling to remove it even for sports. The counselor, Dr. Hill, called Lynn. Lynn called Malcolm. Malcolm asked Cole about the cabinet in their next session. Cole stared at him. It's mine, he said. Just that. No elaboration, no apology. What's in it? The question hung in the air for a long time. Cole looked out the window. Back at Malcolm. Out the window again. Stuff I don't want to get out. Let that land for a second. A 9-year-old, in a reasonable Philadelphia home with a loving mother and every resource a worried parent can throw at a struggling child. This kid has decided that the best available safety measure is a locked box, not for keeping people out of his things, for keeping things from getting out into the world. What kind of child builds a cage to lock something inside it? What kind of child has decided that the real threat moves in the other direction? Lynn Sear is exhausted in a way that goes past tired. Toni Collette plays this with extraordinary precision. There's a scene where Lynn stands outside Cole's closed bedroom door at night, listening, not to anything specific, just listening, hand resting on the doorframe, eyes closed. She looks like a person trying to hear a frequency the human ear isn't built for. She knows something lives in that room with her son. She doesn't know what it is. She doesn't know how to fight it. She doesn't even fully know how to name it yet. The worst part of Lynn's situation isn't the scratches or the cabinet or the saint figurines or the sleepless nights. The worst part is that her son is right there, in the next room, and she cannot reach him across the distance of whatever this thing is. She can feed him and clothe him and drive him to every appointment and cry quietly in parking lots, and none of it closes the gap. She mentions to Malcolm, carefully, haltingly, like she's embarrassed to say it, that sometimes she walks into Cole's room and it's cold in a way the rest of the house isn't. Not a draft, not a vent problem. She'd had the heating system checked twice. Malcolm notes this without visible reaction. Privately, he is starting to feel something shift. Back home, the study door. It's been locked since Malcolm returned to work in the fall. He's noticed Anna doesn't come in there anymore. She used to bring him coffee sometimes, or just to sit in the chair by the window while he worked. Now she gives the room a wide pass when she moves through the hallway, like it occupies a space she's decided not to acknowledge. Malcolm has tried to bring it up twice. Both times, the conversation slid sideways without quite landing anywhere. Their dinners are quieter now. Not hostile, just quieter. Anna moves through the house with a preoccupation that Malcolm can't locate the source of. She's working more hours at the shop. She seems fine. She seems like someone going through the motions of being fine, which isn't the same thing, but Malcolm. Occupied with Cole, occupied with the guilt of Vincent, occupied with the specific energy that goes into rebuilding a professional identity after a catastrophic failure, hasn't pushed hard enough to find out which one it actually is. 2 weeks after the tent conversation, Malcolm pulls out the old tapes. They've been in the study since he went back through Vincent Gray's case file, the original session recordings from years ago, when Vincent was Cole's age. He'd listened to the early ones when he first took Cole's case, looking for the overlap, confirming the parallel that told him this new boy deserved his full attention. He hadn't listened to all of them. He hadn't listened to the later ones from the sessions just before Vincent was discharged, the sessions where, according to Malcolm's own notes from the time, Vincent had become increasingly agitated and difficult to redirect, making what Malcolm had then classified as paranoid claims about his environment. Malcolm puts the tape in, leans back, listens. Young Vincent's voice on the recording is small and urgent. He's describing something in his room, something that he says he can see right now, during the session. Malcolm's own voice on the tape is calm and measured, clinical, the professionally warm, carefully neutral tone of a therapist who believes he's dealing with a child constructing an elaborate psychological defense. The tape hisses. And then, underneath Malcolm's voice, underneath Vincent's voice, underneath the ambient recording noise of an old cassette player in a small therapy room, there is something else. A voice, not on the tape clearly, not loud, barely there, almost dissolved into static, the kind of thing you could easily miss at normal volume. Malcolm turns the tape up, leans closer, listens again. It sounds like a word, maybe 2 words, in a language that isn't English. He plays it 3 more times. The room is very quiet around him. Outside, Philadelphia is doing what Philadelphia does at night. Traffic, someone's TV too loud through a wall, a distant siren going somewhere. Normal, all of it completely, boringly normal. Malcolm sits with the tape player in his hands and feels something he hasn't felt in 20+ years of professional practice. The specific unease of a person who has just realized they might have been wrong about something enormous. Not wrong in the small, correctable way that professionals can shrug off and update their models around. Wrong in the foundational way. Wrong in the way that reaches back through every case file and every clean clinical notation and every confident diagnosis and asks the question you don't particularly want to answer. What if the children were telling the truth? Cole shows up to session 6 with a new scratch. Malcolm notices it immediately. On the back of Cole's right hand, long, thin, absolutely deliberate in its line. Cole catches Malcolm looking and pulls his sleeve down. His face gives nothing away. The shutters are up before the moment can develop into anything, but his hands, folded in his lap, aren't quite steady. And Malcolm, sitting across from him in that simple room with the window and the afternoon light, makes a decision. Not today. Today, Cole isn't ready, and pushing a frightened kid before he's ready is exactly the kind of mistake that made Vincent what Vincent became. But soon, they're going to have to talk about what's really going on, because the scratches don't come from nothing. The tent doesn't come from nothing. The key around the neck, the locked cabinet, the cold rooms, the sleepless nights, none of it comes from nothing. Something is doing this to Colsear, and Malcolm is increasingly, uncomfortably, undeniably starting to think that Cole already knows exactly what it is. The word association game starts as a small thing. Malcolm introduces it at the top of session 7, the way you'd introduce a card trick to a nervous kid, casually, almost apologetically, framing it as something they're just going to try for a few minutes. No big deal. Stop whenever you want. The point isn't the words themselves. The point is the gap between hearing a word and responding to it, which is just short enough that the brain doesn't have time to edit. What comes out in that gap is usually more honest than anything a person would offer if you ask them directly. Cole eyes him. Not suspicious exactly, more like a card player who's been handed a deck and is waiting to see what the trick actually is. Fine, he says. The early rounds are neutral. Malcolm reads from a list. Ordinary words, low charge, nothing designed to trip wires. Chair, pencil, window, rain. Cole responds without hesitation. Single words, even a faint loosening in his shoulders. He almost looks like a regular kid doing a regular thing for a few minutes there. Almost. Then Malcolm starts steering. Dark, Cole says. Stairs. Cole says. Alone. He said this one before in an earlier session. It comes back without variation, automatic, like it's the only answer the word has ever produced. Church. A pause, slightly longer than the others. Then, safe. Malcolm keeps his face neutral. He writes nothing. He just moves to the next word. Night. Cole's jaw tightens by maybe 2 millimeters. If you weren't watching for it, you'd miss it completely. His eyes go to the window briefly. Not at anything outside, just away from Malcolm's face for a half second. Cold, Cole says. One more. People. The room does something. It doesn't change physically. The light stays the same. The chair doesn't move. The traffic outside keeps going. But something in the air shifts. Cole feels it. Malcolm sees Cole feel it. Cole looks down at his hands. Doesn't answer. Cole. Malcolm's voice is very quiet. People. A long silence. The kind that accumulates weight the longer it sits there. Cole's breathing is steady but deliberate, the breathing of someone who is actively keeping themselves steady, which is different from someone who just naturally is. Then he looks up, and the expression on his face is one that Haley Joel Osment somehow locates and holds perfectly. Not fear, not distress, but something more complicated than both. The look of someone standing at the edge of something enormous, staring down at it, knowing that saying it out loud makes it real in a way that can't be taken back. I see dead people. He says it quietly, not dramatically, not the way a line like that gets imitated and quoted and played back on clip shows. He says it the way you'd tell someone something that you've needed to tell someone for so long that the act of saying it has gone past relief and come out the other side into exhaustion. I see dead people. Malcolm goes very still, walking around like regular people. They don't see each other. They only see what they want to see. Cole pauses. They don't know they're dead. You want to watch what Bruce Willis does in the next 30 seconds because it's easy to miss in the moment. Malcolm doesn't recoil. He doesn't reach for a new notation sheet or shift into high alert clinical mode. He stays exactly as still as he was before Cole spoke. What moves is something behind his eyes. A rapid, private calculation, because Malcolm Crowe is a professional who has been in this chair for 20+ years, and he knows, in the way that experienced clinicians know things, that the next 30 seconds will set the entire temperature of everything that follows. He can't show too much, can't show the spike of something cold in his own chest, can't let his response confirm for Cole that what he just said is as enormous as Cole knows it is. He asks the question the textbook gives him. How often do you see them? Cole's answer doesn't hesitate. All the time. They're everywhere. Here's where Malcolm fails him. Not catastrophically, not cruelly, but definitively. He retreats into the framework. The trained, sensible, evidence-based psychological framework that has served him well for 2 decades, and that is absolutely the wrong tool for this specific moment. He starts gently. He always starts gently, asking Cole whether these figures feel real or whether they might be dreams, whether Cole has talked to his mother about this, whether there's a possibility Cole might be describing something he believes he sees versus something that's actually present. Cole's face goes somewhere, not angry, not upset in the conventional sense. He watches Malcolm work through this careful, professional reframe, and his expression does something quiet and devastating. It closes. Not the fast defensive close of someone caught in a lie, the slow, recognizing close of someone who has done this before. Who has sat across from an adult, taken the risk of saying the real thing out loud, and watched that adult hand it back to them with a polite label on it. You don't believe me, Malcolm says, carefully, because he's trying not to lie, that he thinks Cole is experiencing something very real to him, that his feelings are valid, that the fear is genuine and they're going to work through it together. Cole looks at him for a moment, then he looks out the window. The session continues for another 20 minutes. They talk about school, tamissimo, what Cole had for lunch, normal things, surface things. Cole is polite and cooperative and completely, utterly somewhere else for the rest of the hour. Malcolm walks home that evening and the word delusion keeps trying to settle into the notation section of his brain, and he keeps moving it aside. Because here's the thing, he can't shake. Cole Sear doesn't present like a child experiencing delusion. He's been in this field long enough to know what that looks like. The specific quality of fear around a constructed internal reality, the way it centers and inflates, the grandiosity that tends to live underneath it. Cole has none of that. His fear is outward-facing. His descriptions are precise, unembellished, almost reluctant, like someone describing a commute they hate, not like someone elaborating a fantasy. He doesn't seem to want these experiences. He'd give anything to not have them, and all the time. They're everywhere. That's not the grammar of wish fulfillment. That's the grammar of a burden. Malcolm sits in the study for a long time that night. On the desk in front of him, Cole's file, Vincent Gray's file side by side, the old cassette tape player, a glass of water he hasn't touched. He doesn't open either file, he just sits. 2 days later, he goes back to the tape. The session recording from Vincent's last month of treatment. The one with the sound underneath the sound. That almost word, barely there, half dissolved into the tape hiss. He's listened to it 4 times already. Tonight he listens again, this time with headphones, the volume turned as high as it goes, the room completely silent around him. And this time, with the headphones, he hears it clearly. Not static, not a glitch in the recording, a voice, speaking in what takes him a moment to identify as Spanish. A phrase, short, 2 or 3 words. Spoken not by Vincent, not by Malcolm's own recorded voice, spoken by something else present in that room during that session years ago that Malcolm had no awareness of at the time. He sits back in his chair. His reflection looks back at him from the dark window. For 23 years, he has built his career on the conviction that the mind is the source of everything, that what children like Vincent, like Cole, experience is real to them, generated internally, and treatable through the careful dismantling of whatever psychological architecture produced it. That conviction has a good track record. It has helped a lot of kids. It won him a commendation from the mayor of Philadelphia. Right now, in this room, that conviction is doing something he hasn't felt it do before. It's wobbling. He can't tell Cole yet. Can't walk back into that session room and say, I heard something on a tape and I'm reconsidering my framework. That's not how this works. That's not responsible. That's a clinician letting personal experience compromise clinical judgment, and Malcolm Crowe doesn't do that. But he can listen differently. He can stop handing Cole's words back to him wrapped in careful reframing. He can sit with what the boy says and let it breathe instead of immediately reaching for the nearest explanation. He can try. Really try. The possibility that the answer to what is happening to Cole Sear might not be in any file or textbook on the shelf behind him. There's a version of this where Malcolm is still protecting himself, where listening differently is just a safer place to stand than believing. He probably knows that. He goes back on Thursday anyway. Cole is already in the chair when Malcolm arrives, hands in his lap, that careful stillness, the key on the cord around his neck catching the afternoon light for just a second. Malcolm sits down. I want to try something, he says. Different from last time. I'm just going to listen. Whatever you want to tell me. Cole looks at him for a long moment, reading him, running that quiet, experienced calculation about how much trust to extend, how much risk this is, whether this time is different from all the other times. He doesn't open up. Not today. Not fully. But he doesn't close the door either. And that tiny fraction of a door left unlatched is the first real thing that's happened between them since they started. The cold comes first, always the cold. Before anything appears, before anything moves, the temperature in whatever room Cole is in drops by several degrees in the span of a breath. He's learned to read it the way sailors read a sky. Not with hope, just with the grim, practical knowledge of someone who needs to know what's coming so they can brace for it. Then they appear. Not the way horror movies usually stage their ghosts. No jump cuts, no swell of strings, no thing lurching out of a shadow with a noise designed to make you throw your popcorn. Shyamalan does something smarter and significantly crueler than that. His ghosts look almost right. That's the real terror of how The Sixth Sense stages its supernatural encounters. The wrongness isn't loud, it's specific. A woman standing in a kitchen looks fine until you notice the slit across her wrists. A man in the hallway looks fine until the light catches the wound at the back of his head. They don't announce themselves as monsters. They present as people with something slightly, undeniably off about them, and that gap between almost normal and not quite is where the film plants its horror and leaves it there to grow. Cole can't unsee it once he's seen it. You can't unfeel the cold. Cole-licked cabinet in his bedroom, the one with the key on the cord, the one he told Malcolm held stuff he didn't want getting out, got tested one night in October. Cole was in bed inside his tent, flashlight on, saints in their ring. He'd had a decent evening, dinner with Lynn, a little TV, nothing unusual. He'd fallen asleep faster than normal, which should have been a good sign. He woke up to the cabinet shaking, not violently, not the way it happens in cheap haunted house movies, slowly, rhythmically, like something on the other side of the door was trying the lock with patient, methodical attention, testing it, finding it held, testing it again. Cole lay in his tent and didn't move. He'd learned early that moving draws attention. Staying perfectly still was the closest thing to invisible he could manage. The cabinet stopped. The temperature dropped another degree, and then a voice came through the wood, thin, strained, desperate. Speaking in words Cole mostly couldn't make out, except for one phrase that he heard clearly enough to repeat later, word for word, to Malcolm. "I didn't take the master's horse." Over and over, soft and urgent, the declaration of someone defending themselves against a charge from centuries ago, trapped in the loop of a last, terrible moment. Cole pulled his blanket up over his face and waited for morning. School is its own category of awful, Dick. The building is old. One of those Philadelphia schools with thick stone walls and hallways that hold cold the way stone does, which means Cole can never quite tell, in the corridors between classes, whether the temperature drop is architectural or something else. He's learned to watch the other kids. When they don't react to the cold, it's the building. When Cole is the only one who stops walking, the only one whose breath suddenly shows. That's a different thing entirely. The hanged boy appeared in the school hallway on a Wednesday. Cole was between classes, backpack on, moving with the flow of kids. Normal day? Then the current of students parted slightly, not because anyone could see what Cole could see, but the way crowds unconsciously navigate around a disruption. And there he was, a boy, roughly Cole's age, in clothing that wasn't from this decade, standing completely still, head wrong, the full, catastrophic wrongness of what had been done to him on display in a way that Cole could not look away from fast enough. He walked straight past him. He walked past him the way you walk past something when there is absolutely nothing you can do about it, and stopping would only make it worse. Head down, breathing through his nose, counting steps until he could turn the corner. He made it to the bathroom before his hands started shaking. Each ghost carries its specific horror like a wound that never stopped being fresh. The woman in the kitchen, she appears in the Sear house once, stands at the window with her back to Cole, and when she turns, the damage to her wrists is matter-of-fact in a way that's worse than if it were dramatic. She's not presenting it. She's just not aware of it anymore. She wants something. Cole can tell by the way she orients toward him, that desperate locked attention that all of them have when they find a person who can perceive them. She wants to communicate something. She wants to be heard. Cole runs. He runs because he's 9 years old and terrified, and there are limits to what even the most exhausted child can absorb before the body just takes over and makes the decision for you. The burnt woman is different. She appears at school, near the science corridor, and she is the one that makes Cole miss 3 days afterward with what Lynn was told was a stomach flu. She doesn't speak. She moves through the hallway with the peculiar, unfocused drift of someone no longer quite anchored to the physical geography around them. But her face, the damage, the particular horror of it, is something Cole can't organize into a manageable shape and file away. He sees her and his mind simply refuses to process it as information. He goes home. He gets into bed. He stares at the ceiling. Here's what nobody talks about enough when they talk about this movie. Cole Sear isn't traumatized by the ghosts in the way a horror movie victim is usually traumatized, as in, passively, as a recipient of something done to him. He is exhausted by them, ground down by the sheer relentlessness of it, the fact that there is no place to go where the cold can't find him, no time of day when his guard can come completely down. The terror is real and enormous, but living inside constant terror for years does something to a person. It doesn't make you fearless, it makes you tired in a way that regular sleep can't touch. Watch Haley Joel Osment carefully in the scenes where Cole is just existing. Sitting at dinner, walking to school, watching TV on the couch. There's a quality to him that reads, on first viewing, as a sad or troubled kid. On second viewing, you recognize it as the posture of someone who has been managing something overwhelming for so long that the management has become indistinguishable from who they are. He isn't just a scared kid. He's a scared kid who has developed a whole architecture of coping strategies. The saints, the tent, the flashlight, the key, the careful reading of temperature, the practiced stillness, and who runs that architecture every single day with the competence and quiet resignation of someone who has simply accepted that this is what his life requires. The car accident victim shows up on a street corner near Cole's school, and this one is almost worse than the others precisely because the damage isn't visible at first. He's a man, middle-aged, standing on the pavement in ordinary clothes. Cole clocks him immediately. The cold, the fixed orientation toward Cole, the particular transparency at the edges that the living don't have. He looks almost fine. Cole slows his walk. The man takes a step toward him, and then Cole sees the angle of the man's neck, the way one arm hangs. He crosses to the other side of the street without breaking stride. This is who Cole Sear is when the film finds him. High, a kid who has learned to cross the street, to keep walking, to endure, because the alternative is to stop, and that, he has discovered, only makes them come closer. Malcolm, watching Cole in Session 8, sees something new, not the careful stillness, not the defensive politeness. Something underneath those, something that Cole's been letting show by increments since the session where Malcolm said, "I'm just going to listen." It's a kind of active management. Cole scanning the room when he comes in, checking the temperature, positioning himself in the chair in a specific way. Not paranoia, protocol. The habits of someone who has developed a working system for navigating something that doesn't have a manual. Malcolm asks, gently, from the new position he's been holding, the one where he listens instead of reframes, what Cole does when he sees them. Cole thinks about this seriously. He treats it as a real question, which it is. "I try not to look," he says. "If you look, they know you can see them, and if they know, they won't leave you alone." He says this with the flat certainty of hard experience. They just want someone to talk to. They just keep trying. Malcolm asks, "What do they want to talk about?" Cole's answer takes a second. "The same thing everyone wants to talk about." He looks at his hands, then back up. The thing they can't fix by themselves. There's a version of this movie where Cole is the tragic figure, the cursed child, burdened with something monstrous, victim of a universe that handed him the worst possible gift. And that version isn't wrong. But it's incomplete, because alongside the exhaustion and the fear and the locked cabinet and the sleepless nights, Cole Sear is also, unmistakably, a boy with an enormous amount of empathy. He doesn't hate the ghosts, he's terrified of them. There's a categorical difference. When he describes what they want, his voice doesn't carry resentment, it carries recognition. They can't fix their unfinished thing by themselves. They need someone who can hear them. Cole just isn't ready yet to accept that he might be that person. Malcolm, sitting very still in his chair, feels something move in him, not the wobble of a framework being challenged, something quieter than that, the specific feeling of a man who has been looking at a problem from the wrong angle for a long time and has just, slowly, turned to face it the right way. He thinks about Vincent's tape. He thinks about the Spanish words, barely audible, present in a room where Malcolm would have sworn nothing extraordinary was happening. He thinks, what if all the children were right? And this time, he doesn't move the thought aside. The tape player is a small, unremarkable thing. Plastic casing, slightly yellowed from age, the kind of cassette recorder that was already considered outdated when Malcolm was using it. He kept it because he kept everything. Session recordings going back 20 years, archived in labeled boxes in the study, part professional habit, part the vanity of a man who believes his work is worth preserving. He never expected to need them the way he needs them now. He's listened to 3 of Vincent's tapes already. The early sessions. Vincent at 8 years old, small-voiced and cooperative, describing the things he saw with a child's blunt precision. Malcolm's own recorded voice responding, measured, warm, systematically gentle. He'd been good with Vincent in those early months. Patient, present. He can hear that in the playback, and it makes the ending harder, not easier. The later tapes are what he's been avoiding. Session 31. Vincent is 9 now, almost 10. The recorded date on the label puts this about 4 months before discharge. The dynamic has changed by this point on the tape. You can hear it in the cadence of the conversation. Vincent is more agitated, less cooperative with the exercises. His answers are shorter and sharper, the patience of a child who has been doing this for months and has concluded that it isn't helping. Malcolm's voice has adjusted too, slightly more directive, slightly more clinical. The warm patience has developed a professional edge, the almost imperceptible tightening of a therapist who has started to think in terms of case management rather than connection. Malcolm listens to himself and doesn't particularly like what he hears. About 12 minutes into the session, Vincent says something in a low voice that Malcolm, the present Malcolm, headphones on, volume up, has to rewind twice to catch. "There's someone standing behind you." His own recorded voice responds evenly. "Vincent, remember what we discussed about checking those thoughts before we—" "He's right there. He's been there the whole session." "What does he look like?" A pause, then Vincent, very quietly, sad. He looks really sad. He keeps trying to talk to you, but you can't hear him. Silence on the tape. Then Malcolm's recorded voice, pivoting smoothly into a therapeutic redirect. Malcolm pulls the headphones off his ears and sits back. He puts them on again, rewinds, listens to that exchange one more time. He keeps trying to talk to you, but you can't hear him. He almost stops there. That exchange alone is enough to sit with for an hour. But he keeps the tape running. 17 minutes in, Vincent has settled slightly, and they're doing a visualization exercise, a standard grounding technique, something to anchor Vincent in the physical present. Malcolm's recorded voice is guiding him through it. Slow breath, feel the chair, notice the room, the tape hisses, and there, underneath everything, underneath both of their voices, underneath the ambient noise of a therapy room in a building on a Philadelphia street on an unremarkable afternoon years ago, is a third voice. Malcolm goes rigid. He's heard it before, the previous 4 times he played this tape. But those times he'd written it off as interference, as tape degradation, as the kind of audio artifact old cassettes produce when the magnetic coating starts to break down. He'd been doing what he does professionally, finding the most reasonable available explanation and applying it. Tonight, with the headphones in and the room completely silent and his own defenses somewhere at a low ebb, he can't do that anymore. It's a voice, a man's voice, adult, speaking in rapid and urgent Spanish. The words are mostly swallowed by the static, but a phrase breaks through the surface twice, clear enough to hold, "No me dejes aquí, don't leave me here." Malcolm sets the tape player down on the desk with the exaggerated care of someone handling something they're afraid of dropping. The study is dark except for the desk lamp. Philadelphia hum outside. Traffic, wind, the ordinary noise of a city doing its ordinary thing, none of it touching this room right now. He sits with his hands flat on the desk surface and does not move for a very long time. Here is the thought he's been circling for weeks, the one he's been allowing himself to approach but not land on. Cole is not delusional. The framework Malcolm has been applying, the careful clinical model, the years of training, the professional identity built on the conviction that what disturbed children experience has its origin in the architecture of their own minds, that framework is not the right tool. He has been using the wrong instrument on this child the same way he used it on Vincent Gray, and the fact that he's a better and more careful clinician now than he was then is completely irrelevant if the fundamental premise is wrong. A voice on a tape from a session in a room where Malcolm would have staked his career on the absence of anything extraordinary. "Don't leave me here." He opens Cole's file. Not to read it, he knows it by heart at this point. He opens it because he needs the physical act of engaging with it, the anchoring reality of paper and handwriting, and the mundane bureaucracy of a child's case record, while he reconfigures what he's doing here. He has been trying to help Cole Sear manage a delusion, to find the psychological root of the fear, address the trauma, and help the boy build a relationship with reality that doesn't include dead people in school hallways. That is no longer the approach. The new approach, and even forming the thought feels like stepping off a ledge, is to take Cole's account at full face value, to operate from the assumption that what Cole sees is real, externally real, actually present, to stop asking why does Cole believe this and start asking what does Cole need in order to function inside this experience. The difference between those two questions is the difference between a doctor treating an illness and a guide helping someone navigate terrain. Malcolm is going to have to become the second thing. He arrives at session 9 earlier than usual. Cole is in the waiting area with Lynn, backpack on his knees, watching the door with that habitual watchfulness. When Malcolm appears, Cole reads him immediately. That quick, practiced scan he runs on every adult, and something in what he finds makes him sit slightly straighter. Something has changed in Malcolm's face. Cole can see it before a word is spoken. They go into the session room. Malcolm closes the door, sits down, and doesn't reach for the notepad. "I owe you an apology," he says. Cole blinks. "I've been listening to you wrong." Malcolm says it plainly, without softening it into clinical language or packaging it as a therapeutic intervention. Just plainly. "I kept trying to explain what you were telling me instead of hearing it. That was wrong and I'm sorry." Cole stares at him. The silence that follows is different from every other silence in every other session, not the silence of a shut door. The silence of a person recalibrating, running a fast and private assessment of what this means and whether it's safe to update the calculation of how much to trust this man. "You believe me?" Cole asks. "I believe you," Malcolm says. "Watch what Haley Joel Osment does with this moment. He doesn't cry. He doesn't rush forward into gratitude or relief or any of the responses you'd script for a child who has finally been believed after years of isolation. He goes very still, the familiar stillness but with a different quality to it now. Not defensive, absorptive, like someone letting a warm thing land on them carefully. Then he exhales. Just that. One breath, long and slow, like he's been holding it since before they ever met. The session that follows is the longest and most substantive they've had. Cole talks. Really talks. Not the careful, edited, partial disclosure version he's been managing up until now, but the full account. The ghosts he's seen. How long this has been happening. The first time, when he was 4 or 5 and didn't understand what he was looking at. The way the experiences escalated as he got older, as though whatever allowed the dead to perceive him had become more widely known among them over time. The specificity of each encounter, names where he has them, descriptions where he doesn't. Malcolm listens, he doesn't write, he doesn't interrupt. At one point, Cole describes an encounter from 2 years ago. A woman at a bus stop standing in the rain, soaking wet in a way that had nothing to do with the rain, the look on her face. What she said to him? Cole's voice is steady through most of it. But at the end of this particular story, it does something. A slight shift in register, the tiniest crack in the controlled surface, and he stops himself. Looks at the ceiling briefly. I didn't know how to help her, he says. I still don't know if she's still there. Malcolm doesn't offer a platitude. He doesn't say that wasn't your job or you were too young or any of the things a therapist says when a patient is carrying guilt they shouldn't have to carry. He just stays present with it. Because something in what Cole just said has lodged in Malcolm's chest like a splinter. I didn't know how to help her. Not she scared me, not I ran. The regret isn't about his own fear. It's about his inability to do something for her. Somewhere inside all the terror and the locked cabinets and the saints in their careful ring, Cole Sear has been quietly, persistently grieving his failure to be useful to people no one else can even see. Malcolm drives home that evening and the city looks different, not visually. Not in any concrete describable way, but there's a film lifted off the way he moves through it, a kind of opacity that's been present since Vincent Gray stood shaking in his bedroom, since the bullet, since the long fall back into work that never quite felt like solid ground again. He'd taken Cole's case to fix something in himself, to prove that the framework still worked, to not fail the way he failed Vincent. The framework doesn't apply, and he's not the one doing the fixing. Cole Sear doesn't need to be cured of anything. Cole needs what every person who carries something impossible eventually needs. He needs to know what to do with it. She appears at the foot of his bed on a Thursday night. Cole wakes up and she's just there. A girl, roughly his age, standing completely still in the dark at the end of the mattress. He can tell immediately, the way he always can, the cold in the room, the particular quality of stillness that the living don't have, the slight translucency at the edges of her that the dark doesn't quite hide. She's sick, or she was sick, at the end. That much is visible. The pallor, the thinness, the drawn around the eyes look of a child who spent her last months in a bed not entirely unlike the one Cole is currently sitting up in. She's wearing a dress, party clothes maybe, or Sunday clothes, the kind a parent dresses a child in when the occasion is formal. She holds a box, a small wooden box, the kind you'd keep jewelry or keepsakes in, held against her chest with both arms the way a child holds something precious. She doesn't speak immediately. She just stands there, and her eyes, fixed on Cole with that locked, desperate attention he knows from every other encounter, say everything her voice hasn't gotten to yet. Cole doesn't run. This is the moment the film has been building towards since session 1. Not the word association game, not the confession, not Malcolm finally saying, I believe you. This is the real pivot point, the scene where Cole Sear makes a choice that the movie has been quietly arguing he was always capable of making. He sits up in his bed, saints in their ring around him, flashlight somewhere under the blanket, and he doesn't pull the blanket over his face. He stays. What do you want? He asks. His voice is small in the dark room, but it's steady, the voice of someone who has made a decision and is holding it with both hands. The girl, her name is Kyra Collins, though Cole doesn't know that yet, extends the box toward him. What follows takes courage that the movie never makes a big production of, which is exactly right. Cole takes the box. He doesn't look inside it immediately. He's 9 years old and there are limits, but he takes it. He holds it against his chest the same way Kyra was holding it, and she watches him with something that shifts, almost imperceptibly, from desperation toward relief. She says something. Cole hears it. He knows what he has to do with the box. He doesn't know why yet. but he understands with the practical clarity of a kid who has been learning to read these encounters that the box is the point. Whatever is inside it is the thing she couldn't fix by herself. Kyra disappears. The room warms up by about 3 degrees. Cole sits in the dark with the box in his lap for a long time. He tells Malcolm about Kyra at their next session. Full account, the appearance, the box, the request. Malcolm listens without interrupting. When Cole finishes, Malcolm asks one question. Do you know who she is? Cole shakes his head. But he has a name, something Kyra managed to communicate, or that Cole picked up from the encounter the way he sometimes picks up fragments. A family name, Collins, and something about a house, a gathering, people in dark clothes. Malcolm gets to work. It doesn't take long. A funeral notice in a local paper. A girl named Kyra Collins, 10 years old, dead after a prolonged illness that her doctors had been unable to fully diagnose. The obituary is short and careful, the kind of language that papers use when a child dies and nobody has good words for it. She'd been sick for over a year. She passed at home, surrounded by family. The funeral reception is that weekend. Standing outside the Collins house, Cole looks like exactly what he is, a small kid in good clothes, holding a wooden box, about to walk into a house full of grieving strangers to deliver a message from their dead daughter. Malcolm is with him. They don't go inside together. Cole does this part alone, because this was never Malcolm's task to perform. He waits near the door while Cole moves through the crowd of dark-clothed adults, all of them too absorbed in their own grief to pay close attention to a quiet child navigating toward the stairs. This is full of the particular exhausted sadness of a gathering after a child's death, food on tables that nobody is really eating, conversations that keep trailing off, the heavy, airless quality of a space where everyone is performing normalcy over an enormous absence. Kyra's father stands near the window with a drink he's barely touched. Kyra's mother moves through the room receiving hugs with the automated grace of someone running entirely on muscle memory. Kyra's little sister is somewhere in the house too. She is fine right now. She won't be fine for long if nothing changes. Cole carries the box upstairs. Kyra's bedroom is undisturbed, the bedroom of a child who stopped using it months ago but whose parents clearly haven't been able to bring themselves to change anything. Cole sets the box on the bed, opens it. Inside is a videotape. Just that, a small home video cassette, unlabeled, the kind families record ordinary things on. Birthday parties, holidays, Tuesday afternoons in the backyard. Cole looks at it for a moment. He doesn't know what's on it yet. He brings it downstairs. He finds Kyra's father near the window and hands it to him quietly. Says something. The exact words aren't the point, and the film doesn't linger on them. What matters is the handoff. The box passes from Cole's hands to a father's hands, and Cole steps back. The videotape plays. Not in real time for the audience. Shyamalan cuts away from the full content, letting you piece together what's on it from the reaction it produces. But enough gets through. The footage is domestic, home-recorded, the ordinary visual diary of a family, and somewhere in that footage, visible if you know what to look for, is Kyra's mother, at Kyra's bedside, adding something to Kyra's food, not medicine, not in any sanctioned, prescribed, therapeutic way. Something else, something that a mother does when she has decided, in whatever broken, catastrophic corner of her mind that decision was made, that her child's prolonged illness serves a purpose she is not ready to let conclude. Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The film doesn't name it. It doesn't need to. The father watches the tape. His face does something terrible and private. Kyra's mother is still in the room downstairs. Kyra's little sister is still in the house. The relief on Cole's face when he comes back outside to Malcolm is not the relief of a child who has done something heroic. It's quieter than that. The specific exhale of someone who picked up a weight they weren't sure they could carry and found out that they could. He did it. He heard a ghost, took her request seriously, followed it to its end. He let himself be useful to someone that no one else could help, and the world didn't break around him for doing it. Malcolm watches Cole come down the front steps and something in his chest untightens by a degree. "You did good," he says. Cole doesn't make a big thing of it, he just nods, gets into the car, looks out the window at the Collins house as they pull away from the curb, at the lit windows, at the silhouette of a father in there somewhere processing the most devastating thing a parent can process, at a family that is about to be torn apart in order to be put back together, at a little girl who will not get sick the way her sister got sick. Cole did that. A 9-year-old with dark circles and saints on his windowsill and a key around his neck. He did that. On the drive back, Malcolm glances over at Cole in the passenger seat and sees something he hasn't seen in any of their sessions. Not the careful stillness, not the managed, defended composure of a kid running his survival protocols, just a kid, tired and quiet and looking out the window. For the first time since Malcolm took this case, Cole Sear looks his actual age. What the Kyra Collins sequence does for the film is something worth sitting with. Up until this point, The Sixth Sense has been operating primarily as a ghost story, a horror film about a terrified child and a haunted world he can't escape. The Kyra scene reframes the entire premise without announcing what it's doing. The dead aren't just terrifying presences that Cole has to endure. They're people with unfinished business, with things they couldn't communicate, with wrongs that need righting on behalf of people still living. Cole's ability isn't a curse in the way he's always understood it to be, or it's both things simultaneously. It's a curse, and it's the only tool available for a specific kind of job that no one else can do. The gift is inseparable from the weight of it. That's the deal. And Cole, sitting in the passenger seat watching Philadelphia go past at dusk, is starting, slowly, carefully, not all at once, to make his peace with that. He still has one more ghost to help. He just doesn't know it yet. Neither does Malcolm. The school play seems like a small thing until you understand what it cost Cole to get there. It's a historical reenactment, the kind of low-budget, earnest school production that every elementary school puts on at some point. Kids in period costumes, parents with camcorders, folding chairs lined up in a gymnasium. Cole has a speaking role. Not a large one, but a real one, with lines he memorized, with blocking he rehearsed, with a costume Lynn pressed carefully the night before. 6 weeks ago, Cole Sear would not have been in this play. 6 weeks ago, Cole Sear would not have left his room willingly for anything that involved standing in a crowd of unpredictable people in a space he couldn't control. But something has shifted since the Collins house. Since the box, since the drive home, since the quiet permission of Malcolm saying you did good without making it into a lesson. Cole agreed to audition. Cole got a part. Cole showed up to rehearsal 11 times without missing a single one. Lynn sat in the front row of that gymnasium with her hands clasped in her lap and watched her son walk on stage, and her face did something that Toni Collette plays with complete, unguarded honesty. Pure relief. The specific, flooding relief of a mother who has been braced for catastrophe for so long that the absence of it lands like a physical thing. Cole doesn't stumble over his lines. He delivers them clearly, with the focused seriousness of a kid who takes the commitment seriously, and then he walks off stage and the gymnasium applauds and Lynn claps harder than anyone around her. After the production, parents and kids mill around in the way of school events, eating cookies off paper plates, collecting artwork from bulletin boards. Cole finds Lynn near the back. They don't make a big deal out of it. They're not a big deal, making family, these two. They tend to run on quiet gestures and understatement. Lynn squeezes his shoulder. Cole lets her. They head home through evening traffic. The car scene. If you've seen this movie once, you remember the car scene. If you've seen it twice, you understand it differently. If you've seen it enough times, you've probably sat in your own car afterward, in a parking lot somewhere, just breathing for a minute. They're stuck in traffic on a Philadelphia street, gridlocked, barely moving, the city doing its indifferent evening thing around them. Lynn is watching the brake lights ahead. Cole is looking out the side window. The radio is off. The silence between them is comfortable in a way that their silences haven't always been. Then Cole says, "I want to tell you something." Lynn glances over. "The way you communicate with Grandma." He says it carefully, with the deliberateness of a child choosing words that won't accidentally break something. "Did you stop?" Lynn's hands tighten on the wheel by a fraction. Cole's grandmother. Lynn's mother died before Cole was old enough to have clear memories of her. He knows this. Lynn knows he knows this. The question sits between them in the car with a weight that has nothing to do with its 8 words. "At her grave," Cole continues. "You talked to her. You asked her a question last time. Lynn isn't breathing normally anymore." She's holding herself very still. The same stillness Cole uses, which is not coincidence, which is the deepest thing this film quietly says about how children absorb the emotional postures of the people raising them. She keeps her eyes on the brake lights ahead. Her jaw is set. "You asked her if you were a good mother. The traffic doesn't move." Cole looks at his mother's profile. His voice stays gentle, not tentative, not performing gentleness, but actually gentle. The gentleness of someone delivering something that will hurt and caring very much about how it lands. "She said to tell you yes." Lynn makes a sound. Just one sound, not a word, not quite a sob. Somewhere between them, her hand comes up to her mouth. Outside, a car horn somewhere down the block. The city going on. "She said to tell you she sees you dancing sometimes." Before you get out of the car at work, she says you turn the radio up loud and you dance a little. She wanted you to know she watches and she thinks you're beautiful when you do that. Lynn is crying now, not fighting it, just crying, quietly. Traffic stopped around her, son in the passenger seat. What Cole has done here, what the film understands Cole has done here, is not supernatural in the way horror movies typically frame the supernatural. It isn't frightening. It isn't a haunting. It's a message that has been waiting to be delivered. From a woman who loved her daughter and couldn't find a way to say the specific thing that needed saying, passed through the only person who could carry it. Lynn reaches across and takes Cole's hand. She doesn't ask him how. She doesn't pull back. She doesn't do any of the reasonable, protective, sensible things a person does when confronted with the impossible. She just holds her son's hand in a stopped car on a Philadelphia street, and the credits don't roll yet, and outside the world keeps going, and for one moment inside that car, something that has been broken for a very long time gets quietly, imperfectly, genuinely repaired. Cole's arc is complete. Not because he's no longer afraid, he probably will be, some days, in some rooms, for a long time to come. Not because the gift has become easy, but because he has moved over the length of this film, from a child hiding from what he is to a child who has chosen to use what he is. He's helped a dead girl save her sister. He's given his mother a message from her mother. He's let Malcolm in. He's stopped running. The key is still on the cord around his neck, probably. The saints are still on the windowsill, but the tent is down. Malcolm doesn't know yet. While Cole and Lynn sit in stop traffic on that street, Malcolm is home, alone in the house. Anna is upstairs, asleep early, she said, which she's been doing a lot lately. Malcolm is in the living room, going through notes, thinking about Cole's progress, thinking about what comes next for the boy. He is, in all the ways that count, content. This is the cruelty of what follows. The study door. He's noticed, over the past weeks, that the door to his study doesn't open from the outside. He's assumed, without dwelling on it, that the lock is stuck. An old house, old hardware, these things happen. Tonight, passing by, he tries the handle again. It opens. He stands in the doorway, looks around, moves to the desk, pulls open the top drawer. His old session files are in there, Vincent's cassette tapes, notes in his own handwriting, objects that belong to him, in a room that belongs to him, in a house he and Anna have lived in together for years. And then his eye catches something. Anna's birthday. The dinner reservation, an anniversary, a memory surfaces, or tries to, and something is wrong with the surface it's trying to break through. He'd made a reservation. He remembers making it. He remembers looking forward to it. He doesn't remember the evening itself. Not clearly, not with the specific, anchored texture that real memories have. He remembers the restaurant's exterior, the table, handing Anna the menu. He doesn't remember Anna responding to anything he said. He finds her jewelry on the nightstand, his watch, his wedding ring. He's wearing his wedding ring right now. He looks down at his hand to confirm this, and his hand is. The wedding ring sits in a small dish on the nightstand. He can see it clearly. He looks at his hand. This is where Shyamalan earns everything the film has spent 2 hours building toward. Because the revelation doesn't come as a jump scare. It doesn't come as a twist in the cheap, mechanical sense. The plot rug pulled out from under you, leaving you with nothing but the cleverness of the mechanism. It comes as grief. It comes as understanding. It comes as the slow, terrible piecing together of every moment in the film that you now have to revisit simultaneously. The dinner table silences, the study door, the restaurant where the waiter moved around Malcolm as if he weren't there, Anna at the jewelry shop never quite meeting his eye, the wedding ring in the dish. She can't see me, Malcolm understands. She's not being cold. She's not distant. She can't see me because I'm not here in the way I thought I was here. He goes to the couch where Anna is sleeping. He sits beside her, close enough to see her face, tired, sad in the way she's been sad for a year, carrying something he now understands is grief that she's been living inside alone. She fell asleep with the television on, some late program she's not watching. The light from the screen moves across her face. Malcolm watches her for a long moment. He thinks about the award ceremony, the wine in the basement, how happy they were, how real that night was, and how it was also, in ways he didn't understand, the last night. "You were never second," he says quietly. "Ever." She stirs slightly. Whether she can hear him in sleep in some way she can't in waking, the film leaves open. Her face settles. I love you. The television light moves. Anna breathes. Philadelphia outside. Malcolm Crowe sits beside his wife one last time, and then, slowly, the way things end when they're finally ready to, he lets go. The last shot of Malcolm in this film is not dramatic. He doesn't dissolve or fade in a shower of light. He simply isn't there anymore. The room is just a room. Anna is asleep on the couch. The television is on. And somewhere across the city, Colsear sleeps inside his tent with his flashlight on, and his mother is a floor below him, and for the first time in longer than either of them can fully account for, both of them are okay. So what is The Sixth Sense actually about? Not ghosts, or not primarily about ghosts. They're the vehicle, not the destination. At its core, this is a film about people who can't let go of the thing they left unfinished. Vincent Gray, who couldn't move past the verdict Malcolm handed him. Kyra Collins, who couldn't rest while her sister remained in danger. The Spanish voice on the tape, whoever he was, still trying to be heard in a room full of people who couldn't hear him. And Malcolm Crowe, who couldn't leave Anna without telling her the thing he needed her to know. Who took on one more case because he needed to get it right this time. And who got it right? Who helped this specific, remarkable, exhausted boy find his way to the other side of something enormous, and could only then release his grip on the life he was still trying to live. Cole's ability is the lens the film uses to look at all of this. The dead who visit him aren't monsters in the end. They're people. People stuck at the moment of their most urgent, unresolved need, unable to move forward, unable to be helped by anyone around them because no one around them can perceive what they're carrying. They just want someone to talk to. They just need the thing they can't fix alone. Here's my honest take on this movie. The Sixth Sense is not a perfect film, and I say that with full respect for what it achieves. There are moments, especially in the middle act, where the pacing runs a little slow, where the weight of atmosphere comes at the expense of forward momentum. A few of the ghost encounters feel more like set pieces than essential story. Effective, genuinely unsettling, but slightly disconnected from the emotional core. And the film depends so heavily on its ending that a rewatch, while rewarding in the details you notice, doesn't quite carry the same emotional stakes. But here's what it gets completely, undeniably right. The performances. Bruce Willis does some of the best work of his career here by doing almost nothing, by giving Malcolm a quality of quiet, earnest decency that makes the revelation devastating rather than merely surprising. Toni Collette should have won the Oscar she was nominated for. The scene in the car alone is a masterclass in showing grief and love and relief happening simultaneously in one human face. And Haley Joel Osment, 11 years old. I've watched a lot of films. I don't say this lightly. The performance he gives in this movie is one of the finest pieces of child acting ever committed to film. The control, the calibration, the way he makes Cole's exhaustion feel ancient without making the kid seem unreal. You never catch him acting, not once. He just is Colsear, and that's the whole job, and it's immensely hard, and he does it completely. The screenplay is Shyamalan at his absolute peak. Genuinely tight, genuinely layered, every plant paid off, every detail earning its place. The film trusts its audience in a way that not enough studio thrillers do. It doesn't over-explain, it doesn't underline. It puts the pieces out and lets you assemble them, and then it shows you that you assembled them incorrectly, and then it gives you the correct image, and the correct image is heartbreaking. That's craft. Real craft, whatever you think of Shyamalan's later career, and that's a whole other conversation. The Sixth Sense is the work of a filmmaker operating at the height of his abilities. 27 years after its release, the film holds. Not just as a puzzle box, not just as the twist ending that spawned 1,000 imitators and killed the surprise for anyone who got spoiled before they watched it. It holds because Cole and Lynn in that car and Malcolm sitting beside Anna one last time are about something that has nothing to do with genre. They're about the things we need to say to the people we love before the opportunity closes. About the weight of being the only person who can do a specific thing and the choice to do it anyway. About what it means to be heard, really heard, when you've been talking into silence for as long as you can remember. Colsear carried something impossible and found a way to use it. That's worth 2 hours of anyone's time. If you made it this far, thank you. Genuinely. Videos like this one take a lot of time to put together and even more time to watch, and the fact that you're still here at the end means something. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit like and subscribe. It's the best way to let me know this kind of long-form analysis is something you want more of. And drop a comment. When did you first figure out Malcolm was dead? Was it during the film, at the reveal, or did someone spoil it for you? I'm genuinely curious because the answer changes the experience so completely, and I'd love to know which version of this movie you got. See you in the next one. All 75 plus retired phrases from parts 1 final remain retired. Fresh angle. This section operates as a second viewing guide, a full walkthrough of Shyamalan's hidden clues, the film's color language, the staging decisions that only reveal their meaning once you know Malcolm is dead. New tone register, investigative, playful, genuinely excited about craft. Structure, clue by clue deep dive, then color theory, then staging analysis, then what the film does that its imitators never could. Watch The Sixth Sense a second time and something strange happens. It's not that the film becomes worse. That's the fear people have before rewatching it, the anxiety that the twist was the whole thing, and without the surprise you've got nothing. That fear is wrong. What actually happens on a second viewing is that the film doubles in size. Every scene you thought you understood opens up into something else underneath it. Shyamalan wasn't just hiding the ending from you, he was building an entire parallel movie inside the one you thought you were watching, and on second viewing, you get both of them at once. That's harder to do than it sounds, much harder. So let's go back to the beginning and take the whole thing apart. The red rule. Before we get into specific scenes, there's a visual system running through this entire film that most people miss on first watch because they're not looking for it, and that, once you see it, you cannot unsee. Red. Shyamalan and cinematographer Tak Fujimoto made a specific decision during production. Anything in the physical world that has been touched by or associated with the dead, or with the boundary between the living and the dead, is colored red. Not everything red in every scene. Specifically, carefully, deliberately red in the moments where that boundary is present or about to be crossed. Doorknob on the locked cabinet in Cole's room. Red. The tent Cole builds around himself at night. The inner lining. Red. The balloon at the Collins house during the funeral reception, floating past in the background of a shot that lasts maybe 2 seconds. Red. The sweater Anna is wearing in the restaurant scene. The anniversary dinner where she hands Malcolm the menu and he orders and she never quite responds. Red. The crack under the basement door in the opening sequence, just before Vincent appears upstairs. Red. Go back and look at every scene that involves a ghost, a haunted space, or a moment where the membrane between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. Red is there, not screaming for attention, sitting quietly in the composition, doing its job. This is a filmmaker telling you everything you need to know in a language you don't know you're reading. That's not a trick. That's genuine visual storytelling, the kind that rewards attention and patience in multiple viewings, the kind that most blockbuster thrillers don't bother with because it requires planning and commitment and trust that the audience will eventually come back to find it. The basement scene, revisited. The opening sequence, Malcolm and Anna in the wine cellar, warm, light, playful, happy, plays completely differently once you know. Watch what Anna does when Malcolm follows her down. She moves through the space naturally, touches the wine bottles, holds the flashlight, reads from the newspaper with affectionate teasing. It looks like two people. It is two people, technically. But watch the physical staging. Anna leads, Malcolm follows. When they're in the narrow space between the wine racks, Anna is always the one initiating movement, toward the wine, toward the wall, toward the exit. Malcolm responds and mirrors. He's never the one driving the physical geography of the scene. This is true in every scene Malcolm shares with Anna throughout the film. Once you're looking for it, he responds to her movement. He never initiates contact. In the basement sequence, he reaches for her, and the camera cuts before the reach fully resolves. You assume connection because the scene is warm and you're not suspicious yet. Shyamalan gives you the emotional content of an embrace, without the physical evidence of one. Your brain fills the gap. That gap is the movie. Malcolm never opens a door. Here's one that takes a few viewings to notice because it's staged so naturally you slide right past it each time. Malcolm Crowe does not open a single door in this film after the night he's shot. Think through every scene. Cole is already inside when Malcolm arrives, or the door is already open. The study at home, Anna never comes in, and the door is ajar when Malcolm enters. The therapy building, he arrives with Cole already in the waiting room. The Collins house, he waits outside while Cole goes in. The one time he tries a door, the study door, toward the end, when he turns the handle and it opens, is the moment the film begins its final sequence of Malcolm understanding what he is. The door has been locked, not because the lock is broken. The door has been locked because Malcolm, not being physically present in the world of the living, cannot turn the handle. When the door opens that night, it's because Anna was in the study earlier. She left it unlatched. The door opens not because Malcolm opened it, but because it was already, technically, open. Shyamalan puts this detail in front of you in plain sight. The visual grammar of a man who doesn't interact with physical objects the way the living do, threaded through 2 hours of film so quietly that your eye never catches it until you know what to look for. The restaurant. The anniversary dinner scene is the one that, on rewatch, hurts the most. On first viewing, a couple at an awkward dinner. Anna seems distracted, maybe angry, definitely somewhere else emotionally. Malcolm tries to connect. The dinner doesn't go well. You read it as a marriage going through a rough patch. Reasonable, not alarming. The kind of relatable distance that appears in long relationships under stress. On second viewing, Anna is alone at that table. She requested a table for one. The waiter brings her menu. She sits with her wine and her thoughts and her grief on her wedding anniversary in a restaurant she and Malcolm used to go to together, because she is a woman who has been widowed for almost a year and is still trying to figure out how to inhabit her life around the shape of that loss. Malcolm's presence in the scene, his ordering, his attempts at conversation, his reading of the menu is visible to us because we're following him. The waiter cannot see him. Anna cannot hear him. The background noise of the restaurant surrounds them both, and in the middle of all that ordinary life, Anna sits by herself at an anniversary dinner, and the camera lets you believe you're watching something else entirely. The wine Anna drops, the glass that shatters on the floor, happens because her hand isn't quite steady, not because of anything supernatural, because she's alone in a restaurant on her anniversary and she's not doing okay and her hand shook. Malcolm, sitting across from her, thinks he said something wrong. He said nothing. He was never there to say anything. Cole's instructions. Go back to the early sessions and listen to what Cole tells Malcolm about the rules of his experience. They don't know they're dead. They only see what they want to see. On first viewing, this is exposition. Cole explaining the internal logic of the supernatural world the film has constructed. It's interesting. It's a little haunting. You file it under creepy things the ghost kid said and move on. On second viewing, Cole is describing Malcolm to Malcolm's face. Malcolm doesn't know he's dead. Malcolm sees what he wants to see. A therapist returning to work, a marriage under strain but intact, a professional life continuing after a traumatic disruption. He's seeing the version of his existence that he wants to be true, the one where Vincent's attack was a setback and not an ending, the one where he still gets to help people and go home to Anna and make reservations at restaurants for anniversaries. Cole, sitting across from him in a church pew on the first day they meet, already knows what Malcolm is. He's learned to recognize them, the particular quality of how they present, the dead specific way they orient toward the living. He clocked Malcolm from the moment the man sat down. But Cole, at this point in his arc, is still running, still building the walls higher, still choosing not to engage with the thing he sees because engaging has only ever cost him. Is not going to tell Malcolm what Malcolm is. Not yet. He just sits there, in the first scene of their entire relationship, and describes Malcolm's condition to him with clinical accuracy, and Malcolm writes it in his notebook as a symptom. What Anna is actually doing. Anna's behavior throughout the film, the coldness, the distance, the avoidance, reads as marital strain on first viewing, reads as grief on second viewing. She's in mourning. She has been in mourning since the night Vincent Gray came through the window and the gun went off, and she has been doing it essentially alone because there is no easy language for what she lost and how she lost it. Malcolm was not sick. There was no slow goodbye, no time to prepare, no opportunity to say the things that needed saying. He was there, and then he wasn't. Violently and without warning, and Anna has been trying to rebuild a life around that absence in real time. The jewelry shop where she works, she threw herself into it, the way people throw themselves into work because work gives the day a structure that grief will otherwise consume. She moves through her days. She does the necessary things. She goes to restaurants on her anniversary because she is not ready to stop marking it. She sleeps with Malcolm's wedding ring in a dish on the nightstand because she cannot bring herself to put it away. She's not cold. She's devastated. The film presents both as identical in appearance, and that's not an accident. It's an observation about what grief looks like from the outside when the person performing it is trying very hard to hold themselves together. Olivia Williams plays every scene with Anna knowing this subtext, which is why the performance holds up so well on rewatch. She's not playing a distant wife. She's playing a woman who lost her husband and keeps every scene sealed around that fact, because if she opens it, she won't be able to close it again. the scene that tells you everything in the first 10 minutes. There's a moment in the opening sequence, after the basement, after Vincent appears, that most people don't clock as significant because the film is moving quickly and you're oriented toward the confrontation. Malcolm walks upstairs to find Vincent. He moves through the house alone. He checks the living room, the hallway, the bedroom doorway. Anna doesn't follow him. Think about that. A noise in the house at night, your husband goes to investigate, and you stay in the basement? On first viewing, she's drunk. She's not worried. It's probably nothing. On second viewing, she can't hear what Malcolm hears. She doesn't hear the intruder. She hears nothing at all from upstairs because there is no disturbance she can perceive. The cold, the presence, the particular atmospheric wrongness that Cole would later learn to read, none of it is available to her senses. Malcolm moves upstairs towards something she cannot detect. She stays in the basement. Then she hears the shot. That's the last moment in the film where Anna and Malcolm exist in the same time. Everything after the bullet is Malcolm inhabiting a version of their shared life that she can no longer access, and her apparent indifference, her inability to respond to him, to meet his eye, to engage with his attempts at connection, is the behavior of a woman who cannot see what's standing in the room with her. Shyamalan put this in the first 10 minutes. He just trusted that you weren't looking for it yet. What the imitators got wrong. After The Sixth Sense became a phenomenon in 1999, the second highest grossing film of that year, 6 Academy Award nominations, a cultural moment that genuinely shifted how mainstream audiences thought about the twist ending, Hollywood spent the better part of a decade trying to replicate it. Every single attempt missed the point. The imitators understood that the formula was hide a secret, reveal it at the end, make the audience rewatch the film in their heads. What they didn't understand was that the twist in The Sixth Sense isn't the engine, it's the exhaust. The engine is the emotional relationship between Malcolm and Cole, which is genuine and earned and carefully built across the entire runtime, and which makes the revelation devastating rather than merely clever. When you find out Malcolm is dead, you don't feel outsmarted. You feel something much more complicated. A retroactive grief for a man you watched try so hard, a retroactive tenderness for Cole who knew the whole time, a retroactive understanding of Anna that recontextualizes every moment of apparent coldness into something far more human. That's what separates The Sixth Sense from its imitators. Twist changes how you feel about the characters, not just how you understand the plot. Those are very different achievements. The first is mechanical, the second is emotional. And emotional resonance is the thing you cannot reverse engineer from formula, no matter how carefully you study the structure. Joel Osment knew. Here's something worth considering about the performance at the center of this film. Joel Osment knew the ending. He had to. You can't play Cole's behavior in the early sessions, the specific quality of how he relates to Malcolm, without understanding what Cole understands about what Malcolm is. The careful not saying, the willingness to be helped by this man despite knowing his nature, the emotional generosity of a child deciding to trust someone who is, technically, one of the things Cole is most afraid of. All of that requires Osment to be playing multiple layers simultaneously. He's playing a scared kid. He's playing a kid who is keeping a secret from the person he's keeping it from. He's playing a kid who, somewhere deep in the architecture of his empathy, has decided that this particular ghost deserves help too. 11 years old. Running 3 simultaneous layers of a performance without dropping a single one across 2 hours of screen time. The craft discussion around this film tends to focus on the screenplay and on the direction, which are both deserving of everything said about them. But the performance Osment gives is the load-bearing wall. Remove it, give Cole to a less capable child actor, get a performance that's merely competent rather than extraordinary, and the whole structure fails. Twist doesn't land without the genuine weight of Cole and Malcolm's relationship. And that relationship lives or dies on whether you believe this specific child. You believe him, completely, every frame. M. Night's cameo and what it's doing. Shyamalan cast himself as Dr. Hill, the school counselor who calls Lynn about the key around Cole's neck. This is partly a Hitchcock-style tradition. Shyamalan appears in most of his films, but in this case, the casting has a specific function. Dr. Hill is the character who represents the official institutional response to Cole, concerned, procedural, reaching for the nearest available explanation, unable to perceive the real situation. He calls the parent. He documents the behavior. He categorizes the symptom. He's Malcolm before Malcolm changed. putting the director in that role, the man who knows everything about this story, who designed every hidden layer of it, who built the whole architecture, in the role of the person who sees Cole and sees only surface, who reaches for the label before the person, is either a joke at his own expense or a confession, depending on how you read it. Either way, it's a detail that rewards the kind of attention this film keeps asking you to bring to it. The title, The Sixth Sense, is typically understood as a reference to Cole's ability. The sixth sense, the paranormal perception beyond the five ordinary ones. That reading is correct, but incomplete. The sixth sense Cole has is not just the ability to see dead people. It's the ability to perceive what the living cannot, to feel the cold that the living don't feel, to hear the voices the living filter out, to see the figures standing in rooms where the living register. Nothing unusual. But by the end of the film, Cole's sixth sense has been revealed as something more specific than supernatural perception. It's empathy, the capacity to be present with suffering that everyone around him has learned to avoid, to stay in the room with what's frightening, to hear what the dead are trying to say rather than running from the fact that they're saying it, to locate the human need underneath the horror of how it's presenting. That's the sense the title is pointing at. Every person in this film who is stuck, Vincent, Kyra, the Spanish voice on the tape, Malcolm himself, is stuck because no one could perceive them accurately, because the people around them either couldn't see them at all or saw only the alarming surface of what they were experiencing and backed away. Cole Sear can perceive them accurately. That's the gift. That's the burden. That's the whole movie. Why this film still matters? Here's the honest answer to why The Sixth Sense, at 27 years old, remains genuinely affecting even for audiences who know the ending before they start. It's about being believed. Cole's suffering, the scratches, the sleeplessness, the cabinet, the key, the years of isolation, is the suffering of a person whose real experience has been consistently misclassified by every adult system he encounters. The school sees behavioral issues, the pediatrician finds nothing clinical, the counselors reach for diagnoses. Everyone is trying to help, and everyone is helping with the wrong map. Malcolm's arc is the arc of a man who has to dismantle his own professional certainty in order to become genuinely useful. He has to stop knowing in order to hear. And when he finally does hear, when he sits across from Cole and says, "I believe you," without qualification or clinical cushioning, the relief in Osment's face is not the relief of a child being told a comforting lie. It's the relief of a person who has been carrying something alone for years and has finally, at last, found someone willing to carry it with them. That's not a supernatural theme. That's a human one. Every person who has ever been told that what they experience isn't real, that their perception is faulty, that the thing frightening them is a symptom to be managed rather than a reality to be addressed. Every person who has ever needed someone to just stay in the room and listen rather than immediately reaching for the nearest available explanation will recognize what Cole Sear is going through. The ghosts are specific, the aloneness is universal, and that's why this movie endures, not the twist. Not the cinematography, though Tak Fujimoto's work is gorgeous and deserves more credit than it typically gets in the conversation about this film. Not even Shyamalan's structural craftsmanship, as impressive as it is. The reason The Sixth Sense is still worth 2 hours of your time in 2026 is that it understands something true about human beings, about how we carry impossible things, about what it costs to be the only person in the room who can see what's really happening, about what it means to finally be heard, and it communicates that understanding through a ghost story with a great ending. That combination is rarer than it looks. Malcolm Crowe let go when he was ready. Cole Sear kept the flashlight on. And somewhere in a stopped car on a Philadelphia street, a mother held her son's hand while a year's worth of silence between them dissolved into something that didn't need a name. That's the movie. All of it, right there.